the way we can develop our thinking is firstly to understand what is the capacity of the mind itself. So the mind is like an internal instrument. In fact, that's what it's called, Antakarana, internal instrument. And we can treat it like that. But I like to think that the development of thought is like constructing a painting. If you know anything about painting, you'll construct a rough picture first. Actually, if you're painting a portrait, it'll look like a cartoon character in the beginning. And then you apply some shading, and then it starts looking like something like a figure. And then you start putting the details in. You have to get the proportions right and so on. But it's a development, it's an evolving thing. And so thought is like that. It begins as a kind of seed. And if it is a good thought, if it is a thought which is noble, then we can cultivate it, develop it. It may not be fully formed in the beginning, but the creative process and the mechanism of it allows us to develop it into something that then becomes a condensed reality in the future. All thought becomes a condensed reality. There's a principle, a law of condensation. We put a thought in, no matter how rapidly it goes in, two things happen. It's imprinted on the unconscious mind. And secondly, it acts as a mobilizing thing. So that if we have any form of negative thought, and guilt itself is a negative thought, any negative thought, any doubt, any desire, which our very careful philosophy has analyzed to be pain-bearing, then it will materialize as the world around us. There's no doubt. Knowing this, we have to then take a sporting attitude, playing the game, as I say many times. And sometimes we play Cinderella tennis. You know what Cinderella tennis is? It's missing the ball. Playing tennis and missing the ball, Cinderella tennis. So life will be like that. Sometimes we'll miss it, but we continue. So it's all due to practice. Now there's a difference between practice and ambition, or practice and achievement. I want to do something, I want to get something. In the beginning, that may be how we formulate our spiritual life. But as we go on, we realize, no, it's an unfolding. It's the capacity to take the resources around us, divine resources around us, use them. And that requires discrimination or discernment. The quality that we call viveka, you mentioned Vivekananda, yes. He who has the bliss of this discernment or this viveka, this discrimination. So, how does that lead us in any positive direction? Well, unless we're able to sort out things. In your house, you may have things that you want to throw away and things you want to keep. Things that are useful and things that are not. Well, discernment is something like that. Now, everything can be useful if you have a will to use it. So, for example, in meditation, if we take a certain approach, we find there are no distractions whatsoever, because if the ears are open and sound is there, banging noises, for example, or loud music, or perhaps it is, some minor noise and we get irritated by it. We have forgotten, I suppose, that all sound comes from Om. All sound comes from the divine original vibration. Prana acting on Akasha. These two things together, clashing, make a sound. And there's no point in having a sound if there are no ears to catch it. So all the ears are there to catch it. And all the five gross elements bifurcate in this way. So all vibrations with all ears that can catch it. You find all feelings, all pressures, and all skins to catch it. all forms and colors and that kind of thing, and all eyes to catch it. See, like that. All smell, all tastes, and all mouths, all tongues to catch it, and all smells, all scents, and all noses to catch it. These are the gross elements that are so subtle we're not aware of them, but they develop into other things. Supposing we study that carefully and have a penetrating vision to see it all around, every sound will bring us to the divine, because it is the divine that is making a vibration, and it is the divine that is transporting it, and it is the divine that is hearing it, and it is the divine that is registering it. This is the outside thing. But then you see there can be distractions internally also, distractions of the mind. Particularly after a busy day, for example, all the traffic will crowd in, demand attention, and all of that, when we calm things down, we realize it comes from an egoistic position, that is, an assumption I'm an individual, a coordinating principle, no doubt, called ego, but I am then juxtaposed between myself and other people or other circumstances, impinging on my bubble. And my bubble is a kind of world which I declare as my own and private and so on. And as long as the bubble is there, somebody will be there to try to burst it. You have the expression, bursting the bubble. So what to do? Well, we can also see all the thoughts that come, regardless of what they are all because they also come from subtle internal vibrations. Now, all of that, internal and external, these all comprise what we call a field. And a wonderful chapter of the Bhagavad Gita makes it a speciality to discuss this very important issue. So, just to summarize, then I would say that all our experiences, if we designate them as within a bounded area called a field, then we can take any one of them and distinguish between that and the thing that is witnessing it. So that is the whole purpose of meditation. You sit there in meditation, you start off with the capacity to be aware. And there are some forms of meditation that make this awareness a whole exercise for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is. And from that, in our waking life, we can call this mindfulness. So this mindfulness is really another way of being attentive. And when we are steering our attention, we recognize two things are there. So any experience that we have will involve these two things. Two factors will be there. One factor is the object perceived, and it can be physical like the body, and it can be physical like the things that the body interacts with, people, places, events, like that. Or it can be mental, like ideas, emotions, thoughts, these things, impressions, these things come and go. Actually, everything in the objective world, whether it's external or internal, we'll notice they come and go. See, it was the Greek philosophers that brought out something of a dilemma. What is time? So now, if time is an interval between the past and the present, and the past is gone and is therefore not real, not actual, and the future hasn't yet come, so it's also not real, and the interval between the two also goes rapidly, then in view of the comings and goings of unreality, the question then is time real? That's the way they thought. But it's still a valid way of thinking. So one thing we'll notice that in our field of observation, whether it's external or internal, things are coming and things are going. Things change. You must have noticed. So the second thing which is there, that is necessary to perceive anything, is the thing in contrast that doesn't come and go. That's the perceiver. And it is obviously aware. We can call it perceiving consciousness. Now, this word consciousness is a great, great theme for modern discussions. Because materialists, and there's a fashion toward that actually, I was going to say 19th century, but earlier than that, probably around about the 17th century, it started developing. And with occasional minorities here and there, but it came into full flood around about the 19th century and continued into the 20th century. And then there was a revival of adamant atheism, materialist atheism, in the form of modern commentators who felt that religion and science, they invoked science to support atheism. And that atheism was a kind of materialism. You don't need anything else except matter. And people of the most profound reputation, the cleverest of people, the most intellectual of people, would have made this declaration. We have no room for God. But you see, the God that they're talking about is a caricature of a kind of God that no theist believes in. In other words, they assume that God is a created thing. You know, the common question. So God created the world. Who created God? They're assuming that God is in the field of observation, that God is an object. But then the question is outstanding. If God is an object, if the world is an object, then what is the perceiver? It still brings up this question. And some may say, well, there's only an elusive perceiver. Why? Because if we're materialists, the only answer to any question will be from the point of view of matter, and the brain must produce self-awareness, consciousness. It must provide us with emotions. Section of the brain will deal with it. Another section of the brain will deal with something else. Rear of the brain will deal with something else. The corpus callosum, which divides the two hemispheres of the brain, can be interfered with it by operations. We can take the brain away completely, or the consciousness associated with it, through anesthesia and so on. Clearly, it's the brain, because it can be nothing else. But other scientists have seen the catch, the difficulty. See, the difficulty is this, that even when you take the activity of the brain away, there is still a state of awareness. There is still some activity going on. And other studies, particularly at Virginia University in America, will make studies about the neurology of consciousness. And the mistake is, nobody asks the question, who knows it? Whatever you say, who knows it? What is the perceiver? The simple fact is that for any experience, these two factors must be involved. An object that is being perceived and that which is the perceiver. It's very simple. Further, in modern physics, the observer is a necessary thing. You cannot do your physics without an observer. This is called the observer effect. So you can't get away from it, even though you are kicking and screaming against a concept of God, which may well be outdated, and we can agree on that. But when we say outdated, we have to be careful, because there's a slow evolution toward this conclusion about the distinction between the perceiver and the perceived, and ultimately leading to one thing, and that is there is an eternal aspect to the perceiver. So the perceiver is called the knower of the field in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The rest is the field. And so the Bhagavad Gita deals very comprehensively with a description, what do we mean by the field? What is the field? And then the knower of the field persists when, as an unchanging witness, when all the other changes are taking place, whether external or internal, whether of the body or whether of the mental scenes. So what do we do in meditation? We acknowledge the field and all the components within it, and let it be for the time being, knowing that the only reason why I can observe distractions is because I am the witness of them. I'm the perceiver. That itself becomes a meditation, acknowledging I'm the perceiver. So that's a very good starting point, and requires us to embark on a complete discernment exercise. In our waking life, we do it with the backup that there is a rise and fall of the senses that gives us, again, another conclusion. What is the practical application of all this? Well, according to the Upanishads, when we have been expert, as it were, in this exercise of discernment, then all our grief goes away, all sorrow goes away. And when we look at the things that are producing sorrow, we see things like attachment to the field, let's put it in that language, or we attach, and the components within the field, people within the field, places within the field, thoughts within the field, and so on. So the Katha Upanishad brings us this. It says, Indriyanam pratag bhavam udayastamayo jayat pratag utpadaya manamam makvidiro na shojachi. This so shachi, shachati is a phrase used repeatedly in this Katha Upanishad. We're concerned with not just pain, we're concerned with loss. And the word for this is shochati, that is loss, grief. Na shochati, without that. Knowing the separate nature, therefore, of the senses, which spring separately from the various subtle elements. Various subtle elements, there are only 5 of them. We mentioned them previously. I don't know if they were recorded. So we can go through them briefly again. It's very important to understand them. That all the things, all the phenomena within the field come from a subtle area within the field. And the subtle area within the field, in terms of the physical world, will be a potentiality, a matter, unmanifest, with energy impinging on it, creating sense of all vibrations, means all sounds if you have ears that catch it. And therefore, it has no value unless it produces all the ears that catch it. And all the media, the electromagnetic field, a permitting area that conducts all these vibrations free of charge. And we have an interference mechanism called the ear, designed to catch certain sounds at certain frequencies. And all those ears are then going to an interpretive faculty that very quickly determines the identity of the sound. All of this happening very quickly. And then, of course, we have all this kinetic energy which is there. We have all pressures, and naturally all skins that catch it. We have all eyes and all forms that catch it, the other way around, all forms and eyes that catch it. Then we have all the tastes, that is, all the various tastes and all the mouths or tongues that catch it. and then all sense, all smells, and all the noses that catch it. And these are subtle elements. And from those subtle elements produce everything else. But what produces the subtle elements is another question. And the only reason why these senses are there is these senses internal in the mind, they rise and they fall. These senses which spring separately from the various elements, and knowing also that they're rising and setting. How do they rise? How do they set? You wake up, they rise. You go to sleep, they set. These are separate. The wise person doesn't grieve, knowing this separation between that which doesn't change and the rising and setting of these things. So the discrimination, the discernment of the fundamental knower or witness called the divine self, Atman, in the Bhagavad Gita it's called Purusha. From the sense organism that we insist on. The Kathopanishad is insisting on it. And when the wise person knows that the material senses don't come from the self, then their rise and fall belong to their own nature. He grieves no more because he's made that separation between nature, which has the rise and fall, that has a changing characteristic, and this eternal self that acts not only as an unchanging entity, but a witness seeing their rising and falling. And coming back then to your original question, when you sit, and there are disturbances externally or internally, both maybe, one connected with the other, then notice that there is some entity that is able to not only observe it, but recall it. What is that? That's your eternal divine self. And so we can easily make a kind of game out of discerning all the time between what falls into the category of the observed, that is the field of observation, and what falls into the category of the divine self, which is variously called the spectator, the permitter. The Bhagavad Gita mentions all of these things. The enjoyer, because if you're in an audience, then you'll be enjoying the performance. So I think I've given an example previously. Supposing you're an artist and you have a gallery of paintings, and you have people visiting the art gallery to appreciate the beauty and the aesthetics. They have the freedom to wander around, look at the beautiful works of art, see the brushwork, and wonder, and in some cases try to figure out what it's all about. Still there's a sense of artistic creativity going on, and marvel at it, and have the luxury of going to the next painting without necessarily purchasing it. But the person who puts the gallery on, the artist himself, the one who's handing out free drinks and so on, is very anxious. Will people like my paintings? Will people understand my paintings? Will people purchase my paintings? And if so, how much for? Or will they just criticize it and leave having enjoyed the free drinks and food? The real enjoyer is the spectator. The real enjoyer is the guest. The one that feels I have to do everything and gets involved in it. Well, in the example, then they're the ones that are full of anxiety and difficulties. So there's every merit in making this distinction. Not only is every merit, but it's fundamental to our spiritual life to understand what is the difference. Otherwise, we get involved in the idea of ownership and the idea of doership. That produces all our difficulties, all our problems. So we can say that there's a coordinating center, in a sense, which is called the ego. Bhagavad Gita mentions it. And also, when reactions are controlled on scriptural lines, then all of this clears. That's how we discern. Now, what do we mean on scriptural lines? The Bhagavad Gita gives us a whole list of virtues that can be cultivated. To the extent that we might think it's overwhelming. Well, we just take one or two of them and see if we can cultivate those just to start with. And so when evolution comes from, well, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad gives that famous prayer, lead us from darkness to light, lead us from the unreal to the real, darkness to light, death to immortality. That comes from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So, on one side, these waves, subtle waves, evolve into all these various things that we've mentioned. That has to be acknowledged. Second thing that has to be acknowledged is that behind that is this suggestion by the Kathopanishad about the rising and setting, and the dissimilarity between that and the one which is watching it, the observer of it. Both the dream and the waking state give place to a peaceful, homogeneous kind of condition, state of consciousness. And we call that our deep sleep. That also can be observed. So we usually ignore these states, these shifting states. We don't try to find out what the significance may be and what a daily lesson it can give us. But then we can extend that to the whole of the cosmos, because we see the same cyclical pattern of behavior. And if you study this wonderful thing called the Purusha Suktam that I mentioned probably the other day, you'll see the whole universe visualized in this way as a cosmic person. Purusha Suktam, Purusha in this case means the cosmic person. The idea is what happens locally here, this drama that we enact, the same thing happens, including birth, life, and death. So there are two eternals, as it were, going on, where there's no real birth, real death, the perpetual cycle of nature. Nature we call Prakriti. The eternal, that's the external field. That goes on. We don't think there's a beginning and an end in this model. And this model is being adopted in some form or other because we realize we can't get an answer from a linear evolution where there's a start from nowhere, from nothing, as it were. Now, theists say it's not from nothing, it's from God. All right, fair enough. But no explanation from the materialist. It just starts. We don't ask why it starts or where it starts. It just starts. We assume it. And from there we can see gradual expansion, 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 and that is our evidence for it. But what other people are saying is, no, it looks like there could be something cyclical going on. This is a very ancient concept. So that's going on all the time. And when we understand this nature of the cosmos, we can see that this witness self is not just localized in you, it is there everywhere. In fact, if we have an imagination about it, we'll see that the Lord, who is the self, has his hands and feet everywhere, eyes and heads everywhere. We can see that as a cosmic vision. Then, when we ask a question, such as how a thought arising and what will we do about it, leave it be. Leave it be for the time being. Allow it 4 seconds or something like that. And then put in the scriptural values. That's the game that we have to play. We learn to do that and sustain that. Do that with confidence on the basis of this discernment between the observer and the observed, the perceiver and the perceived, the witness and the changing nature. Then, how are we to realize that entity? What is the practical advice? You have to diligently cultivate these noble qualities which start as thoughts. virtues. And we do that in a most basic way. We do that by acknowledging there's an eternal self, but we also do it when acknowledging that there are various means toward it. In fact, it is this 13th chapter that will tell us about 4 approaches, each one valid. It'll tell us about meditation. It'll tell us about selfless action, karma yoga. It'll tell us about jnana yoga, where that's all the discipline is. Discernment, discernment, discernment. And it'll tell us about worship. All of these are employed. Now, Ramakrishna shows us something very interesting because he sets an example. So we don't have to worry too much about this formless entity that we call the observer, because the observer is formless. If it had a form, it would be an object. So it's formless, it's subtle. And when one starts, as a revelation brings total fulfillment, we do it in a careful way. Sri Ramakrishna has set the model for it by worshipping many forms of God, different forms of God. And later, if you study his spiritual endeavors, spiritual practices, after realizing the formless under Tutupuri and getting Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he chooses to remain at the level of forms. So he shows that forms and the formless are not mutually contradictory. We can develop love of God because that leads us toward the formless. He harmonizes them in his life, in his personal life. But if he can do it so, we should also try and do it, if we can aspire to do that. So let's take a look at this discernment, 13th chapter. Now, I don't know if there's time to cover the entire 13th chapter. We can only do it very briefly, so we'll skip over a few things. But there are some subject matters which we can view as kind of headings. So, first thing is that everything is consciousness. And what we call the field is this expressed consciousness. When people debate, and serious people, materialist people mainly, are debating this consciousness. What is consciousness? What part of the brain can we find it? And there have been so much research to do with it, but nobody can locate this thing called consciousness. And what they mean by consciousness is self-awareness, the intrinsic aspect of I believe I exist, I experience things, I can't deny it. But how do you figure it out if it is something that is a product of a material organic brain? That's the problem. How do you get consciousness, globally or locally, from the unconscious? How do you get a stone evolving into a highly complex individual such as human? And don't think that this part of consciousness that we call intelligence is purely restricted to humans. You know, there's an insect called a blue butterfly, a great blue butterfly. And as a caterpillar, it sits and ants come across it, attracted by its secretions. It's secreting a sweet kind of thing. And then it simulates the scent of the queen ant. To the extent that the ants think it is the queen, not having eyes to see, they think it's a queen. They can only sense with their senses. And they bring it into their nest and they look after it. In the meantime, this caterpillar is growing nicely because it's feeding on the larva, which is there. And once it's getting big and so on and so forth, having a nice free meal, like that, having duped the ants by its secretions and so on, then at a certain point will then blossom into a butterfly and fly off. In other words, it's a cannibalistic kind of thing, but it has the intelligence to know what to do and how to do it. It's astonishing. This is only one example of intelligence in the whole of the field. And when we view it in its proper context, we'll see that it is obvious that it is an expression of consciousness itself, not unconsciousness. Because the brain is just made from food, just like every other cellular part of the body. So we have to get used to the idea that everything, in fact, is consciousness, and as a fundamental thing, and it's expressed in the field. And the field, therefore, is described in great detail. We can go through it, what the Bhagavad Gita tells us about it. Then it tells us about the vehicles of revelation, and I've described it here as singing and reasoning. I think it's a wonderful way of putting it, because when we are truly devotional, when we are devotees, then we want to sing. Now, some people want to sing audially, some people want to sing silently, some people feel a singing of the heart, an upliftment, a movement in the emotional field. So there's that side of it, and there's the reasoning side of it. Both are necessary. As Swami Vivekananda puts it, if you don't have a little reasoning along with the bhakti yoga, then you'll become a howling fanatic. It was Ramakrishna who prayed to the Divine Mother, "Oh, please, Mother, don't make me a dry ascetic. Don't make me a dry intellectual. Give me some heart, give me some feeling, give me the beauty and the glory of this devotion. Mobilize the emotions. Let me enjoy it." But by the same token, he could easily put that aside, as it were. And even that devotion will lead him to a state of ecstasy and bring him to the point of this formless kind of experience that he first experienced, initially with great difficulty, under Totapuri. But it took him very quickly, within 3 days, he managed to get it. Totapuri complained, "It took me over 40 years to get to the state. This person has done it in 3 days." And then you see, we have to understand that the field comprises all these different categories. We can put it in the Sankhya context, 24 different categories. And they all have their effects as well. And that is all to do with the field. The knower is also the experiencer, and the knower is defined. But Krishna makes an astonishing declaration. He says, "Know me to be the knower in all the fields, not just your little field." The whole conversation begins with the question, "Can you please tell me this thing called nature, Prakriti, and the Purusha, the field and the knower of the field?" Immediately is acknowledging there are two things necessary for an experience, and the connection in between would be the knowledge, or the knowledge itself, the process, that which is to be known. I want to learn this. And what is Krishna's reply? This body is called the field. Idam shariram kshetram itya abhidityati. And that which is conscious of it is called the knower, or the knower of the field, by those who have knowledge thereof. Why should we not have knowledge of this? We take for granted, this is the problem, we take for granted that the field is everything, And although we are aware that there is a perceiver somewhere, we tend to think it is somewhere inside the field. And this is the error that materialists are making. That creates then a puzzle for them, what they call the hard question of consciousness. So, and know me, he goes on to say, kshetrajnam chapi mam viti, to be the knower in all the fields. Knowledge of the field and the knower of the field is true knowledge. Now, what do we mean by true knowledge? True knowledge is the knowledge of this separation, the field and the knower of the field. As we come to make this distinction, it soon dawns on us that actually the knower of the field, the perceiver, and the field are in some way connected, because the one doesn't operate without the other. Then we come to another conclusion. What is that? That actually the field is an emanation. It is a manifestation, a projection of the knower of the field, and it is like a dream. It comes, it goes, it vanishes. It has no real existence. It is an ethereal thing. And that disappears how? By promoting these kinds of thoughts which steer us to this experience. So what is the field? What are its properties? What are its modifications? Just to make sure we understand. And then what is the knower? The rest of the chapter is describing this. And what are the vehicles of revelation? How do we know about this? Because sages, wiser people than us, have sung this in many ways, chanted it in many ways, and put it in past. In other words, put it into scripture. And the scripture contains reasoning that is convincing. It's not good declaring something dogmatically. It is so. We have to see, well, our experience is also like this, but there's a reasoning behind it. And when we reason it out, it's because we know what are the components of the field and what is the knower of it. So what's the constitution of the kshetra, the field? The 5 great elements, Mahaputani, Ahamkaro Bhutir Avyaktam Evacha. The 5 great elements. Ego is some kind of coordinating principle that gives us a sense of I. It's useful to us. Without this sense of I, we can't sit on an elephant that can crush us with one foot and master it and make it move trees and so on. We cannot master sciences. We can't do anything with our artistic inclination. If it wasn't for this ego, we have to assert it. Part of our psychosocial evolution to assert that. But that is there. It's a part. It is still part of the field. Intellect is part of it. And also the unmanifest. 10 sense organs, 1 mind, 5 objects of the senses. You summarize all of this, you have 24 cosmic principles. In other words, the 16 components, that is the mind, here called the intellect. But then you have the 1 mind also, which is there. The 1 mind, the 5 objects of the senses. 1 mind is the 1 cosmic mind. Now there is something called solipsism or panpsychism or some other variation of it to say, yes, there seems to be 1 mind. There are variations of that. Excuse me. And modern scientists are falling into these camps, understanding that the ancient Indian philosophies have something to it. That maybe if we hold these ideas, it gives us an explanation of what is this consciousness. So that's the constitution of the kshetra, the field. And then going on, our reactions to it, desire and aversion, these are pairs of opposites, pleasure and pain, the body itself, our own intelligence, fortitude, that is the will to carry on despite everything. That briefly stated is the field together with its modifications. Those are its modifications. In other words, all your distractions, so-called in meditation as well, come within the scope of the field. And then what you deal with it? Self-culture is necessary. Humility, whole list is there. Humility, modesty, non-injury, forbearance, uprightness, service to the teacher, purity, steadfast, self-control. The list goes on. Dispassion for sense objects, and also absence of egoism, perception of misery and evil in birth, death, and old age and sickness, seeing these for what they are, not paying much attention to them. That's part of the cycle of life. Non-attachment, non-identification of oneself with family, here put as son, wife, home, and all those things, and constant equanimity in both favorable and unfavorable circumstances. Like a calm ship, not worrying. Oh, there's a wave coming, there's going, but the boat remains stable. Or the other image, you see, like a lotus flower, not affected by the water itself, remaining stable. Then he says, unswerving devotion to me, maicha, and yogena bhaktir avyak vicharin. Unswerving devotion to me through the yoga of non-separation, resorting to solitude, distaste for company. The closer we get to a unity, the more our sorrow and grief and difficulties and pain disappears. Then, in summary, constant application to scriptural study and spiritual practice, understanding the aim of true knowledge. This is declared to be knowledge, and what is opposed to it is ignorance. It couldn't be plainer than that. We're all suffering from this ignorance that says, the field is everything and I'm part of it. The field of my experience. But there is a sense, I am the knower of it. There is a sense of an existent entity. We call it I. We just mix it up a little bit. So that's the field defined. I'm sure we all know what it is now. It consists of body, mind, and all the objects of the senses that go outside, and the interaction of them, and our reaction to these. That's all called the field. Now you'll often see me draw a circular kind of diagram. I put it in, divided in half, and in the one half of it, I put the body together with the so-called mind. The label I. On the other side, I call it people and places and objects and events and scenes and so on, to symbolize it through the sun. That total circle is called the field. And then what is the knower of the field, the one that stands outside the field? That one is being described now. Now, if you know this knower of the field, if you're aware of this now, truly understand it, truly know it, then what is the gain? You attain immortality. Everybody wants it. Nobody wants to die. It is the beginningless, supreme, absolute, here called Brahman, which is said to be neither being nor non-being. It's a very interesting thing. Does it exist? Does it not exist? The beyond descriptions of existence and non-existence. And so we don't see that there is any quality like that. You can't say it's a being. It's not an object. Otherwise, it's in the field. And you can't say that it's not a being. It's neither being nor non-being. Beyond description. Then, what would be the effect of its presence? Manifesting now with hands and feet everywhere. Sarvata pani pardam tat sarvatu shirir mukham. With hands and feet everywhere. with eyes and heads and mouths everywhere, with ears everywhere. It exists pervading all. Take that passage and make it a meditation. That when you open your eyes and try to appreciate everything, every hand, every eye, whether it belongs to an insect or a person, or whether it belongs to a galaxy, these are all belonging to this one entity that expresses itself in this way. In other words, consciousness is the knower of the field, and consciousness is expression called the field. In the production of the body and the senses, Prakriti or nature, that is the field, is said to be the cause. In the experience of joy and sorrow, Purusha, this self, the knower of the field, is said to be the cause. Why do we say said to be the cause? And insert everywhere, Krishna says it's said to be, because I'm not saying it for the first time, he's saying. It's been said way before me by wise people, realized people. Then the Supreme Purusha in this body is also called what? The witness, the spectator. It's called the permitter. It's called the supporter because it supports everything. And the enjoyer. It's the great Lord, the Supreme Self. The whole chapter is worth a thorough study. Now, if you know this difference between the Purusha and the Prakriti, and know that the Prakriti is made from these three ingredients that we call gunas, if you really know this, you're never born again. You're never born again in whatever way you live. In other words, whatever status you have, whether it's the higher status, lower status, regardless of your occupation, etc. And here are the 4 yogas coming. The some behold the self in themselves through the purified mind of meditation. What's the purpose of meditation? To purify the mind. That's all. Others by the path of knowledge. This is Jnana Yoga, discernment, pure discernment. Yet others by the path of action. Karma Yoga will also lead it to doing all actions with a state of awareness, concentration, stability, lack of anxiety, and you can combine it with devotion, dedicating all our actions to the Supreme. Or simply doing the actions without a sense of ownership or doership. All action belongs to the field. Still others, knowing the ways, not knowing these ways, worship as they have heard from others. Others will tell them there's a Supreme Being. It looks like this. You can form a good relationship with this. You can sit and make an empty chair and have a dialogue with that. And in that dialogue, you can empty all your human sorrows and so on, knowing that there is an eternal listening ear, and hear the response. And offer flowers, offer incense, offer your heart, offer songs, offer the sweetness of this pure rallying of your emotions. If you do that, also, you go beyond death. They go beyond their death by their devotion to all these things that they have heard from reliable authorities. And then, whatever is born, whether it's inanimate, whether it's inanimate, whether it's, for example, anything which falls in with the geological compounds, even rocks and so on, everything. Know it from the union of the field and the knower of the field. There is a union, there's an association between the knower of the field and the field. And so what we have is a mixture of the absolute and the relative. And that is why we are able to see this divine in all these beings, in all these entities. And so he goes on to say, Samam sarveshu bhuteshu titishtatam parameshwaram vinashat avinashantyam ya pashyati sa pashyati. He who sees, he's the one who sees this Supreme Lord abiding equally in all beings. That's the key. The undying and the dying. What will happen? Well, because he sees this Supreme Lord existing equally everywhere, doesn't injure the self. Why would you injure yourself? He doesn't injure the Supreme Self by the self, and thus reaches the Supreme Lord. And the one who sees that all actions are done by this glorious Prakriti alone, this divine energy, this manifestation of the Supreme in a, if you can say, in a feminine form, as the pure energy of the entire universe, divine energy. All actions are done by that, and the self internally is actionless. You can see it like a chessboard. The king remains actionless, only moving at most one square at a time. The queen is moving everywhere. But they are the same entity. There is a unity. There is no difference between the two. One is manifested. The other one is sitting there unmanifest. Then, if you see this diversity of beings as abiding in the one, is a way of thinking of it. And their evolution from that one alone, then one becomes that Brahman. Becomes, well, we make a concessional language about it. For you are that already. Having no beginning and devoid of any qualities. This Supreme Self is imperishable. Though dwelling in the body, it doesn't act, it's not affected. It's the key, then this discernment is the key to stability. As the all-pervading Akasha, the supreme space, isn't tainted because of its subtlety, so the self existing everywhere in the body isn't tainted either. And then the illustration comes, if you want an image of it. As the one sun illumines the whole world, so does he who dwells in the body illumine the whole body. All of this is a wonderful theme for meditation. And they who perceive with the eye of wisdom this distinction between the kshetra and kshetranya, the field and the knower of the field, and also the means of freedom, they attain the supreme. Freedom from what? Freedom from the attachment to nature, or the illusion that the field is everything and there's nothing other than the field. There is a knower of the field. There is a perceiver and a perceived. Now, when you find any distractions in meditation, you can bring to mind that observing them itself highlights this whole thing. And when you see a distracting thought, and you want to combat it because it keeps coming up, and you feel you can't do anything about it, you let it come up, you let it go, because it's part of the field. And the fact that you observed it means there's an knower or perceiver behind it. And then you have the freedom also to put things on scriptural lines in, so that those thoughts dominate, and create it like a painting, starting off with a rough thing, making it a resolution, making it stronger and stronger and stronger, more defined, as you increase your skill in painting your picture. Do it creatively, do it sportingly. That then has the effect of eliminating guilt and the necessity to achieve. There's no necessity to achieve in this context. All right, we leave it there. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be upon all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Om